The sack of potatoes weighed more than it should have, dragging against the dusty road like an anchor, and Lily Whitmore was certain her arms would fall clean off her shoulders before she reached the boarding house 3 miles ahead. Fort Bridger, Wyoming, stretched behind her in the afternoon heat of July 1876, a collection of weathered buildings that had sprung up around the old military post. She had spent her last coins on the potatoes, knowing she would need to prove herself useful at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house if she wanted to keep the job she had been promised in the letter. At 22 years old, Lily had left everything behind in St. Louis after her aunt passed, following the only opportunity that presented itself, cooking and cleaning for room and board in a frontier town she had never seen. The sack slipped from her cramping fingers and hit the ground with a thud. Lily bent over, pressing her palms against her knees, trying to catch her breath. Sweat plastered her dark blonde hair to her forehead beneath her bonnet, and her simple cotton dress clung uncomfortably to her back. She had been walking since dawn, and the sun was already beginning its descent toward the western mountains. "Need help with that?" The voice came from behind her, deep and unhurried. Lily spun around, startled. She had not heard anyone approaching on the empty road. The man sat astride a massive roan horse, watching her with an expression that was neither threatening nor particularly friendly, just observing. He was the kind of man the frontier seemed to grow from its very soil, broad-shouldered and powerfully built, with sun-darkened skin that spoke of years spent outdoors. His dark hair fell past his collar, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. He wore buckskin pants and a simple homespun shirt that strained across his chest and arms, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. A rifle rested across his saddle, and a knife hung at his hip. "I can manage," Lily said, straightening up and wiping her palms on her skirt. She had learned quickly in the weeks since leaving St. Louis that accepting help from strangers often came with expectations she had no intention of meeting. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the packed earth with barely a sound. Up close, he was even larger than she had thought, easily over 6 feet tall, with a presence that seemed to fill the space around him. But his movements were careful, deliberate, as though he was aware of his own size and strength. "That sack weighs near about 50 pounds, he said, nodding toward the potatoes. "And you have got another 3 miles to town. Your arms are shaking." Lily glanced down at her trembling hands and quickly hid them behind her back. "I will rest a moment, then continue. Or I could carry them for you." He bent down and hefted the sack onto his shoulder as though it weighed nothing at all. "Where are you headed?" "Mrs. Henderson's boarding house," Lily said, frustration and relief warring in her chest. "But I did not ask for your help." "No, you did not." The man swung back onto his horse with the sack balanced easily on his shoulder. "But you need it all the same. You can walk alongside if it makes you feel better about it." Lily opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. Her pride bristled at being rescued like a helpless child, but the practical part of her mind knew she might not have made it to the boarding house before dark otherwise, and night on the frontier roads was not something she wanted to experience alone. "What's your name?" she asked, falling into step beside the horse. "Nathan Brennan," he said. "Most folks call me Brennan." "I am Lily Whitmore. Thank you for your help, Mr. Brennan." "Just Brennan." He glanced down at her from his elevated position. "You are new to Fort Bridger." It was not a question. Lily nodded anyway. "I arrived on the stage this morning. I have a position at the boarding house." "Cooking?" "Yes." "And cleaning?" She looked up at him curiously. "How did you know?" "The potatoes. And you have got flour dust on your sleeve." He gestured with his free hand. "Mrs. Henderson runs a decent establishment. She will treat you fair." They walked in silence for a while, the horse's hooves creating a steady rhythm against the road. Lily found herself studying Nathan Brennan from the corner of her eye. He sat his horse like a man who had spent more of his life in the saddle than on foot, and there was something quietly watchful about him, as though he was constantly aware of everything around him. She had heard stories about mountain men, rough and wild characters who lived in the high country, trapping and hunting and avoiding civilization. She wondered if that was what he was. "Do you live in Fort Bridger?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Near it, up in the mountains, about 10 miles north." He shifted the potato sack slightly. "I come into town once a month or so for supplies." "That must be lonely." "It is quiet," he said. "There is a difference." Lily thought about that. She had spent her whole life in St. Louis, surrounded by people and noise and constant activity. The idea of living alone in the mountains seemed impossibly remote, but there was something in the way he said it that made her wonder if perhaps he preferred it that way. "Have you always lived in the mountains?" she asked. "Since I was 18. Before that, I was a farm boy in Kansas." He glanced down at her again. "You're full of questions." "I'm sorry. I did not mean to pry. I did not say I minded." His tone was mild, almost amused. "Just making an observation." The sun continued its slow descent as they walked, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The mountains rose in the distance, dark and imposing, their peaks still touched with snow even in the height of summer. Lily felt small beneath them, insignificant, but also oddly exhilarated. This was nothing like St. Louis with its crowded streets and sooty buildings. Here, the sky seemed endless, and the air tasted clean despite the dust. "What made you come out here?" Nathan asked suddenly. Lily considered how much to tell him. "My aunt died. She was the last family I had. There was nothing left for me in St. Louis, and Mrs. Henderson needed help, so I came. That's a long way to travel alone." "I did not have much choice." She heard the defensiveness in her own voice and tried to soften it. "Besides, I wanted an adventure, something different." "The frontier will give you that," Nathan said, "though not always the kind you might want." Before Lily could ask what he meant, the buildings of Fort Bridger came into view around a bend in the road. Relief flooded through her, along with a strange sense of disappointment. She had only known Nathan Brennan for an hour, but there was something solid and reassuring about his presence, something that made her feel safer than she had in weeks. Mrs. Henderson's boarding house stood at the far end of the main street, a two-story building with a wide front porch and curtains in the windows. Nathan rode directly up to it and dismounted, lowering the potato sack to the ground with care. "Thank you," Lily said, meaning it. "I truly could not have managed without you." "You would have found a way." He tipped his hat to her. "You seem the stubborn type." Before she could decide if that was an insult or a compliment, the front door of the boarding house flew open, and a plump woman with graying hair bustled out. "You must be Miss Whitmore," Mrs. Henderson exclaimed, wiping her hands on her apron. "I was beginning to worry. The stage was supposed to arrive hours ago." She noticed Nathan and smiled warmly. "Brennan, it is good to see you. Thank you for helping our new cook." "Madam," Nathan said, nodding respectfully. "She had a heavy load." "Potatoes, Mrs." Henderson clapped her hands together. "Wonderful. We have been running low. Come inside, dear. You must be exhausted. Brennan, would you like to stay for supper?" "I appreciate it, madam, but I need to get back before dark." Lily felt an unexpected pang of regret. "Will you be coming back to town soon?" she asked before she could stop herself. Nathan looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "In a few weeks, most likely." "Well, you are always welcome at my table," Mrs. Henderson said. "Miss Whitmore here is going to transform my cooking. I just know it." Nathan mounted his horse and gathered the reins. He looked down at Lily one more time, and something in his expression made her heart beat a little faster. "Good luck, Miss Whitmore," he said, then turned his horse and rode off down the street without looking back. Mrs. Henderson picked up the sack of potatoes with surprising strength and ushered Lily inside. The boarding house was clean and well-maintained, with a large common room dominated by a long dining table and a kitchen that opened off to one side. The smell of baking bread filled the air. "Let me show you to your room," Mrs. Henderson said, leading Lily up a narrow staircase. "It is small, but it is private, and you will have it all to yourself. That is more than most girls in your position can say." The room was indeed small, barely large enough for a narrow bed, a dresser, and a washstand, but it had a window that looked out over the street, and the bed had a real mattress and clean linens. Lily set down her small carpet bag and felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. It is perfect." "Call me Margaret when it is just us," the older woman said kindly. "Now, wash up and come down to the kitchen. I will show you where everything is, and you can help me finish preparing supper. We have 8 boarders at the moment, all men, and they eat like horses." Over the next few days, Lily fell into a routine. She woke before dawn to start the fires and prepare breakfast, worked through the morning on bread and preparations for the midday meal, cleaned and did laundry in the afternoon, and cooked supper in the evening. It was exhausting work, but Margaret was a fair employer who never asked more than Lily could give, and the boarders were mostly respectful, if rough around the edges. But through it all, Lily found her thoughts returning again and again to Nathan Brennan. She told herself it was foolish, that she had barely spoken to the man, that he was probably just being neighborly and thought nothing more of it. But she could not forget the way he had lifted that sack of potatoes as though it weighed nothing, or the quiet confidence in his voice, or the unexpected gentleness in his manner despite his intimidating size. "You are thinking about Brennan again," Margaret said one evening as they worked side by side in the kitchen, peeling vegetables for a stew. Lily felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was not." "You get a certain look on your face," Margaret smiled knowingly. "He is a good man, that one. Keeps to himself mostly, but he helped me out once when some drifters tried to cause trouble here. Scared them off without even raising his voice. Just stood there on the porch, and they took one look at him and decided they had business elsewhere." "Does he have a wife or family?" Lily tried to keep her voice casual. "Not that I know of. He has lived up in those mountains alone for near about 10 years now. Traps and hunts, brings furs into town to trade. Does some work as a guide for hunting parties in the fall?" Margaret paused in her peeling and gave Lily a shrewd look. "He does not come into town often, and when he does not spend much time socializing. But I have never known him to go out of his way to help someone the way he helped you." "He was just being kind." "Maybe," Margaret said. "Or maybe he saw something he liked." Lily did not know what to say to that, so she focused on the carrots in front of her and tried not to let hope take root in her heart. 3 weeks passed. Lily grew more comfortable in her role at the boarding house, learned the rhythms of the town, and began to make a few friends among the other women in Fort Bridger. But a part of her remained restless, watching the road from her window in the evenings, wondering if she would see a lone rider on a roan horse. Then one afternoon in August, as she was hanging laundry in the side yard, she heard Margaret call out a greeting. Lily's heart jumped into her throat. She dropped the wet sheet back into the basket and hurried around to the front of the house. Nathan Brennan stood on the porch, talking to Margaret. He looked much as he had before, dressed in buckskin and homespun, his long hair tied back with a leather cord. But this time he carried a pair of bulging saddlebags over his shoulder. "Lily," Margaret waved her over, "Brennan has brought us some venison, fresh killed this morning." "Madam," Nathan said, nodding to Lily. His eyes met hers, and she thought she saw something warm there, something that had not been present before. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Brennan," Lily said. "I told you to call me Brennan." He swung the saddlebags down and opened one, revealing packages wrapped in oiled cloth. "I had more than I needed. Seemed ashamed to let it go to waste." "Well, we are grateful," Margaret said. "Lily, why don't you help him carry these into the cold cellar? I need to finish this mending before supper." It was such an obvious ploy that Lily felt her cheeks burn, but Margaret was already bustling back into the house. Nathan picked up the saddlebags and gestured for Lily to lead the way. The cold cellar was accessed through a door in the floor of the kitchen, with stone steps leading down into a cool, dark space where Margaret stored her perishables. Lily lit a lantern and carried it down, very aware of Nathan following behind her, his footsteps heavy on the wooden stairs. "You can set them on that shelf," Lily said, pointing. Nathan placed the saddlebags down carefully, then straightened and looked around the small space. "This is well organized. Margaret runs a tight ship." Lily fidgeted with the lantern handle. "How have you been?" "Good. Busy." He paused. "I thought about coming to town sooner." "Oh?" Her heart was beating so hard she was certain he could hear it. "I wanted to see if you had settled in all right." His voice was careful, measured. "If you needed anything." "I am doing well. Margaret has been wonderful, and the work is hard but satisfying." She hesitated. "I'm glad you came." Nathan took a step closer. In the confined space of the cellar, he seemed even larger, but Lily found she was not frightened. Instead, she felt drawn to him, to the quiet strength that radiated from him like heat from a fire. "Miss Whitmore," he began, then stopped. "Lily, I'm not much for pretty words or courting rituals. I spend most of my time alone, and I'm probably not fit company for a lady like you." "I'm not a lady," Lily said softly. "I'm a cook at a boarding house." "You are a lady," Nathan said firmly, "and you deserve someone who can give you a proper life, not a rough mountain man who lives in a cabin with no neighbors for miles." Are you trying to talk yourself out of something, or me out of something? Lily asked, surprising herself with her boldness. A slow smile spread across Nathan's face, transforming his serious expression into something almost boyish. Maybe both. What if I told you I've been watching the road every evening, hoping to see you ride into town? The smile faded, replaced by an intensity that made Lily's breath catch. I would say I have been finding excuses to ride this direction for 3 weeks, then turning back because I did not want to seem forward. That seems like a waste of time for both of us. Nathan laughed, a deep, genuine sound that echoed in the small space. I suppose it does. He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle. Would you let me court you proper, Lily Whitmore? Even though I do not have much to offer except myself and a life that is not easy? I did not come all the way to Wyoming looking for easy, Lily said. And yes, I would like that very much. He bent his head and kissed her then, softly at first, then with growing confidence when she rose on her toes and kissed him back. His beard was softer than she expected, and he smelled of pine and leather and wood smoke. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. I should probably ask Margaret's permission before I start kissing you in her cellar, he said. Probably, Lily agreed, not moving away. They stood there for a long moment, neither wanting to break the spell. Finally, Nathan pulled back reluctantly. I need to do some trading in town. Can I call on you this evening? Sit on the porch and talk proper? I would like that. They climbed back up into the kitchen, where Margaret was conspicuously absent. Nathan touched his hat and headed for the door, then paused and looked back. Thank you for the potatoes, he said. Lily blinked in confusion. What? That day on the road. If you had not been carrying those potatoes, I would have just ridden on past, probably never worked up the nerve to talk to you. His eyes were warm. So thank you for the potatoes. Then he was gone, leaving Lily standing in the kitchen with a grin on her face that she could not have wiped away if she tried. Margaret appeared from the back room almost immediately. Well? He's coming to call this evening. I knew it. Margaret clapped her hands together. Oh, this is wonderful. He's a good man, Lily. A bit rough around the edges, but solid all the way through. You could do much worse. I know, Lily said softly. I think I could do much worse, and I might never do better. That evening, Nathan returned just as the sun was beginning to set. He had cleaned up, his hair still damp from washing, and he wore a clean shirt that still could not quite contain the breadth of his shoulders. They sat on the porch swing while Margaret and the boarders tactfully stayed inside, though Lily was certain they were all pressed against the windows watching. Tell me about your cabin, Lily said, tucking her skirts around her legs. Nathan leaned back, making the swing creak under his weight. It is not much. 1 room with a loft for sleeping. Stone fireplace I built myself. There's a stream nearby, good hunting all around. In the winter, the snow gets deep, sometimes too deep to get into town for weeks at a time. Does that bother you, being cut off? No, I've always been comfortable with my own company. He glanced at her. Though lately I've been thinking it might be nice to have someone to talk to besides my horse. What is your horse's name? Red, not very original, but it fits him. Lily smiled. Do you grow any food or do you hunt for everything? I have a small garden, beans, squash, some herbs, but the growing season is short up there, and the deer and elk do not respect garden boundaries. He paused. The soil is good, though. If someone knew what they were doing, they could grow a lot more. Are you asking if I know how to garden? My mother kept a garden. Before she died, she taught me a bit. Lily looked out at the darkening street. I used to help her. I always thought I would have a garden of my own someday, but in St. Louis there was never space. Nathan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was low. If things work out between us, Lily, if you decided you could stand living up in those mountains with me, I would build you the biggest garden you could want. Clear as much land as you need, fence it proper, protect it from the wildlife. You could grow anything your heart desired. Lily turned to look at him, her throat tight with emotion. That's a fine offer, Nathan Brennan. It is a true offer. He reached over and took her hand, engulfing it in his much larger one. I'm not saying it would be easy. The life is hard and winters are harsh, but I would work every day to make sure you were happy and safe. That is a promise. I believe you, Lily whispered. They sat together until the stars came out, talking about everything and nothing. Nathan told her about life in the mountains, about tracking and hunting and the changing seasons. Lily told him about St. Louis, about her aunt who had raised her after her parents died of cholera, about learning to cook in the kitchen of a restaurant where her aunt worked. They discovered they were both 28 years old, both orphans, both accustomed to hard work and solitude. When Nathan finally stood to leave, he held Lily's hand for a long moment. "I will be back in a few days," he said. "I want to do this right, give you time to be sure about me." "I'm already sure," Lily said. "Even so, a lady deserves to be courted proper." Over the next 6 weeks, Nathan rode into Fort Bridger every few days. Sometimes he brought gifts, wildflowers picked from the meadows near his cabin, a rabbit he had snared for Margaret's stew pot, a beautifully tanned deerskin that he said would make fine gloves for winter. Other times, he simply came to sit with Lily on the porch, or to walk with her through the town, his presence solid and protective beside her. The people of Fort Bridger watched with interest. Nathan Brennan was known but not well known, respected but distant. Seeing him court a woman with such obvious devotion was a source of endless speculation and gossip. But no one had a bad word to say about him, and Lily found herself gaining status simply by being the object of his affection. "You are going to marry him," Margaret said one evening as they washed dishes together. It was not a question. "If he asks me," Lily admitted. "He will ask. That man is head over heels in love with you, even if he has not said the words yet." Margaret handed her a plate to dry. "Are you ready to leave the boarding house, to live up in those mountains?" Lily thought about it honestly. "I am nervous," she said, "but also excited. I never felt like I belonged in St. Louis. It always seemed too crowded, too noisy, too much. Here, even though it is so different, I feel like I can breathe. And when I am with Nathan, I feel like I have found something I did not even know I was looking for." "That is love, dear girl," Margaret patted her arm, "and it is a beautiful thing to watch bloom." In early October, as the aspen trees turned gold in the mountains and the air took on a crisp edge, Nathan asked Lily to ride up to his cabin with him. Margaret raised an eyebrow at the request, but when Nathan assured her he would have Lily back before dark and that his intentions were entirely honorable, she agreed. Nathan had brought a gentle mare for Lily to ride, and he helped her mount with a steadying hand. They rode out of Fort Bridger together, heading north into the foothills. The day was perfect, the sky a brilliant blue, the air scented with pine and wild sage. "It is beautiful," Lily breathed as they climbed higher, the valley spreading out below them. "Wait until you see the view from the cabin," Nathan said. They rode for over 2 hours, following trails that Lily would never have seen on her own. Nathan pointed out landmarks, showed her a spring where the water ran cold and pure, warned her about a place where a bear had been spotted recently. He was completely at ease in this wild country, and Lily found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse beneath her, trusting Nathan to guide them safely. The cabin appeared suddenly, nestled in a clearing surrounded by towering pines. It was larger than Lily had expected, built of solid logs with a stone chimney rising from one end. A small barn stood nearby, and she could hear the sound of running water from somewhere close by. Nathan dismounted and helped her down, his hands strong around her waist. "Welcome," he said simply. The inside of the cabin was surprisingly tidy. The main room had the promised stone fireplace, a large wooden table with 2 chairs, a shelf filled with supplies, and various tools and equipment hung neatly on the walls. A ladder led up to a loft where she could see a bed covered with furs and blankets. Everything spoke of a man who lived alone but took pride in his space. "It is wonderful," Lily said honestly. "I can feel how much work you have put into it." Nathan looked pleased. "Come outside. There's something I want to show you." He led her around to the side of the cabin, to an area that had been cleared of trees. The ground had been turned, and a sturdy fence of split rails enclosed a space that was easily 40 feet on each side. Lily stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Nathan, I've been working on it since August," he said, coming to stand beside her. "The soil needed to be turned and amended with compost from the barn. The fence needs to be high and strong to keep out the deer. I was going to wait until spring to plant anything, but then I thought about those potatoes you were carrying." Lily turned to look at him, tears pricking her eyes. I still have some of them, Nathan continued. The ones Margaret did not need. I kept them, thinking maybe we could plant them here. They would not produce much before the frost, but they would be a start. Then in the spring, if you wanted, we could plant more. Beans, squash, carrots, whatever you like. You built this for me? Lily's voice came out as a whisper. I built it for us. Nathan took her hands in his. Lily Whitmore, I know we have not been courting long, and I know I'm asking you to give up the life you have been building in town, but I love you. I have loved you since the day I saw you standing on that road, too stubborn to admit you needed help. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, if you will have me. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to watch you plant that garden in the spring and help you harvest it in the fall. I want to build a life with you here, in this place, where we can make our own way together. Lily was crying now, but she was also smiling so hard her face hurt. Yes, she said. Yes, Nathan Brennan, I will marry you. I will come live in your cabin and plant a garden and build a life with you. I love you too. So much it scares me sometimes. Nathan pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a fierce joy that took her breath away. She clung to him, feeling the solid strength of him, the steady beat of his heart against hers, and knew she had made the right choice. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying at the same time, Nathan rested his chin on top of her head. We should get married soon, he said, before the snow comes. That way we will have the whole winter together, just the two of us. What about the town? People will expect a proper wedding. We will give them one, small but proper. Then I am bringing you home and not sharing you with anyone for months. Lily laughed against his chest. That sounds perfect. They spent the rest of the afternoon at the cabin. Nathan showed her around the property, pointed out where he planned to build an addition to the cabin in the spring to give them more room, where he thought a chicken coop could go, where there was a perfect spot for a root cellar. Lily walked through the garden space, her fingers trailing over the turned earth, imagining it green and growing and full of life. Before they left, Nathan dug up several of the potatoes he had stored in his own small cellar and placed them carefully in a cloth bag. We will plant these tomorrow, he said. You can stay in town until the wedding, but these are going to be yours, growing here, waiting for you to come home. The ride back to Fort Bridger was filled with plans and dreams. They decided to marry in 3 weeks, giving them time to make arrangements and for Lily to prepare. Nathan would build up supplies for the winter, and Lily would work with Margaret to find someone to take her place at the boarding house. When they reached town, Nathan helped Lily dismount and held her close for a long moment. 3 weeks, he said. Then you will be mine, and I will be yours, forever. Forever, Lily echoed and kissed him one more time before going inside. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Margaret threw herself into wedding preparations with enthusiasm, enlisting the help of several other women in town. They made Lily a dress of soft blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes, and Nathan purchased a new suit of clothes that made him look almost civilized, though nothing could quite tame his wild mountain man appearance. Nathan rode into town every few days, always bringing something for the cabin, a new set of dishes, warm blankets, a rocking chair he had traded for. But he also spent time planting the potatoes in the garden he had built, carefully spacing them and covering them with straw to protect them from the early frosts. He reported on their progress each time he came to town, and Lily loved the way his face lit up when he talked about their future garden. The wedding took place on a crisp October morning in the small church at Fort Bridger. The whole town turned out, curious to see the mountain man marry the boarding house cook. Nathan stood at the altar in his new clothes, looking uncomfortable but determined, his eyes never leaving Lily as she walked down the aisle on Margaret's arm. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When Nathan slipped the ring onto Lily's finger, a simple gold band he had purchased from the trading post, his hand trembled slightly. But his voice was steady and strong as he repeated his vows, promising to love and cherish her for the rest of his days. You may kiss your bride, the minister said with a smile. Nathan cupped Lily's face in his large, calloused hands and kissed her gently, reverently, as though she was something precious and breakable. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers. There was a celebration at the boarding house afterward, with food and music and dancing. But as the sun began to dip toward the mountains, Nathan pulled Lily aside. Are you ready to go home, Mrs. Brennan? Lily's heart swelled at the name. I am ready. They said their goodbyes, Lily hugging Margaret tightly and thanking her for everything. Then Nathan lifted her onto the gentle mare she had ridden before, and they set out together into the mountains as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. The ride to the cabin was different this time. Lily was no longer a visitor coming to see a possible future. She was coming home. When they arrived, Nathan dismounted and reached up for her, swinging her down and into his arms. Without a word, he carried her over the threshold of the cabin, kicking the door shut behind them. The cabin was warm, a fire already burning in the fireplace. Nathan must have come up earlier to prepare everything. Lamps glowed softly, and the table was set with the new dishes and a simple meal of bread and cheese and dried fruit. Nathan set Lily on her feet but kept his arms around her. "Welcome home," he said softly. It is perfect," Lily whispered. She reached up and touched his bearded face. "You are perfect." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and Lily felt heat bloom through her body. Nathan lifted her again and carried her up the ladder to the loft, where the bed was piled with soft furs and blankets. He laid her down gently and then paused, looking at her with an expression of wonder. "I cannot believe you are really mine," he said. "Believe it," Lily said, pulling him down beside her. "I am yours, and you are mine, and nothing is ever going to change that." They made love slowly that first time, learning each other's bodies, discovering what brought pleasure and joy. Nathan was gentle despite his size and strength, always careful, always attentive to Lily's responses. And afterward, as they lay tangled together under the furs, Lily felt a completeness she had never experienced before. "I love you," Nathan murmured against her hair. "I will spend every day of my life trying to make you happy." "You already do," Lily said, pressing a kiss to his chest. "Just by being you." The first weeks of their marriage were an adjustment. Lily had to learn the rhythms of life in the mountains, how to keep the cabin warm, how to manage water from the stream, how to cook on the fireplace instead of a stove. Nathan taught her to recognize animal tracks, to tell when a storm was coming, to respect the wildness of the land they lived on. But there were also moments of pure joy. Morning coffee shared in front of the fireplace, Nathan's arm around her shoulders. Afternoon walks through the forest, identifying plants and listening to bird calls. Evenings spent in easy conversation, Lily sewing or knitting while Nathan worked on repairs or carved wooden utensils. And every few days, they would walk out to the garden together to check on the potatoes. Against all odds, they were growing, the green shoots pushing up through the straw, reaching for the sun. "They are doing well," Nathan said one afternoon, crouching down to examine the plants. "We might actually get a small harvest before the first hard freeze." "They are survivors," Lily said, kneeling beside him. "Like us." Nathan looked at her, his expression soft. "Like us," he agreed. Winter arrived in earnest in November, bringing snow that piled up around the cabin and made travel to town impossible. But Nathan had prepared well. The cabin was stocked with supplies, the barn held hay for the horses and the 2 cows Nathan kept, and there was plenty of firewood stacked against the walls. Lily discovered she did not mind being snowed in. In fact, she loved it. She and Nathan existed in their own private world, with no demands or interruptions. They spent long, lazy mornings in bed, talking and making love. They cooked together, Nathan surprisingly handy in the kitchen despite his rough exterior. They read aloud from the books Nathan owned, mostly practical volumes, but also a few novels and books of poetry. In December, Lily realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but wanted to be certain before she said anything. When she finally told Nathan, he stared at her in shocked silence for a long moment, then swept her up in his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby," he kept saying, setting her down carefully as though she might break. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Lily asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it." He knelt down and pressed his face against her still flat stomach. "Hello in there. This is your father. I'm going to love you so much." Lily ran her fingers through his long hair, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "We are going to be a family." "We already are," Nathan said, looking up at her with shining eyes. "But yes, a bigger family, the best family." The winter passed slowly but contentedly. Nathan became even more protective of Lily, constantly making sure she was not working too hard, that she was eating enough, that she was warm and comfortable. Lily found it endearing most of the time, though occasionally she had to remind him that she was pregnant, not an invalid. In March, when the snow began to melt and the first signs of spring appeared, Nathan hitched up the wagon and they made the long trip down to Fort Bridger. It was Lily's first time away from the cabin in months, and she was surprised by how much she had missed the town and the people in it. Margaret cried when she saw Lily's rounded belly and hugged her tightly. "Look at you, glowing and beautiful. And Nathan, you are taking good care of her, I can see." "Trying to," Nathan said gruffly, though his chest puffed out with obvious pride. They spent 2 days in town, restocking supplies and catching up with friends. But Lily found herself eager to get back to the cabin, back to the peace and privacy of their mountain home. She said as much to Nathan as they loaded the wagon. "I feel the same way," he admitted. "Town is nice for a visit, but the mountains are home now." When they returned to the cabin, Lily walked immediately to the garden. The snow had melted away, revealing the turned earth beneath, and there, just beginning to poke through the soil, were tiny green shoots. "Nathan, look," she called. He came to stand beside her, looking down at the emerging plants with satisfaction. "Spring," he said. "Time to plant the rest of the garden." Over the next few weeks, they worked together to plant the garden in earnest. Nathan had saved seeds through the winter and traded for more in town. They planted beans and squash and carrots and lettuce, onions and radishes and herbs. Lily showed Nathan how to space the plants properly, how to create rows that would be easy to weed and water. Nathan built trellises for the climbing beans and set up a simple irrigation system to channel water from the stream. It was hard work, especially for Lily with her growing belly, but it was also deeply satisfying. There was something primal and right about putting seeds into the earth and trusting them to grow, about building something that would sustain them. As spring turned to summer, the garden began to flourish. The potatoes they had planted in the fall, which had survived the winter underground, sent up strong green shoots. The new plantings sprouted and grew, transforming the bare earth into a sea of green. Lily spent hours in the garden, weeding and watering and tending, her hands in the soil, the sun warm on her back. Nathan watched her from the cabin doorway one morning, his arms crossed over his broad chest, a small smile on his face. "What?" Lily asked, looking up and catching him watching. "Just thinking about that day I found you on the road with those potatoes," he said. "If someone had told me then that a year later I would be married to you, watching you tend a garden at our home, waiting for our baby to be born, I would have called them a liar." Lily straightened up, pressing a hand to her aching back. "Life is strange that way." "Strange and wonderful." Nathan crossed to her and pulled her gently into his arms, careful of her belly. "I love you, Lily Brennan, more than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone." "I love you too," she whispered. "Thank you for carrying my potatoes home that day. Thank you for planting me this garden. Thank you for giving me this life. Thank you for being stubborn enough to try to carry 50 pounds of potatoes 3 miles, Nathan said with a laugh. Thank you for taking a chance on a rough mountain man. Thank you for making me happier than I ever dreamed I could be. In August, as the garden reached its peak of production, and the cabin was filled with the smell of vegetables Lily was preserving for winter, their son was born. It was a long labor, and Nathan was beside himself with worry. He had ridden to town the week before to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Cooper, an experienced older woman who had delivered half the babies in the territory. She stayed at the cabin, sleeping in the loft while Lily and Nathan moved to a makeshift bed downstairs. When Lily's labor started in the early hours of the morning, Nathan wanted to help, but Mrs. Cooper shooed him outside. "This is women's work," she said firmly. "You go chop wood or hunt or do something useful. You're making her nervous, hovering like that." "I want to stay," Nathan said desperately, looking at Lily. "Go," Lily said, though she reached for his hand and squeezed it tight. "I will be fine. Mrs. Cooper knows what she is doing." Nathan went, but he did not go far. Lily could hear him pacing on the porch, occasionally calling out to ask if everything was all right. Despite the pain and exhaustion of labor, she found herself smiling at his anxiety. Finally, as the sun reached its zenith, their son entered the world with a lusty cry. Mrs. Cooper cleaned him up and placed him in Lily's arms, and she stared down at the tiny, perfect face in wonder. "He is beautiful," she whispered. "Let that father in before he breaks down the door," Mrs. Cooper said with a laugh. The door flew open and Nathan burst in, looking wild-eyed and terrified. But when he saw Lily sitting up in bed, holding their baby, his whole face transformed. Are you—" Nathan could not seem to finish a sentence. "We are both fine," Lily said, tears streaming down her face. "Come meet your son." Nathan approached slowly, as though afraid he might break the spell. He knelt beside the bed and reached out with one finger to touch the baby's tiny hand. Immediately, the infant's fingers closed around his father's finger, gripping tight. "He's so small," Nathan breathed. "He's strong," Lily said. "Feel how hard he's holding on." Nathan looked up at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names, but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at her son's face, Lily knew exactly what his name should be. "William," she said. "After your father. We will call him Will." Nathan bowed his head and Lily saw tears drop onto the blanket. When he looked up again, his face was wet but smiling. "William Nathan Brennan," he said. "Welcome to the world, son." Mrs. Cooper stayed for a week, making sure both Lily and the baby were healthy and strong. She taught Lily about nursing and caring for a newborn, and she taught Nathan how to swaddle the baby and change him without panicking. "You are going to be fine," she said to Nathan on the day she left. "You have got good instincts, both of you. That baby is lucky to have you as parents." After she left, Lily and Nathan fell into a new rhythm. Nights were broken by the baby's needs, and days were organized around nursing and naps. But neither of them minded. They took turns walking Will around the cabin when he fussed, sang to him, talked to him constantly. Nathan proved to be a surprisingly natural father. He was gentle and patient with the baby, speaking to him in a low, calm voice that seemed to soothe Will instantly. And despite his rough appearance and large, calloused hands, he handled his son with exquisite care. One afternoon in late August, Nathan brought Will outside wrapped in a blanket and walked with him through the garden. Lily watched from the cabin door as Nathan showed their son the growing plants, explaining what each one was, how they would harvest them, how these vegetables would feed them through the winter. "This garden exists because your mother is stubborn and strong," Nathan said to the baby, who stared up at him with unfocused eyes. "She carried these potatoes all by herself until I convinced her to let me help. And now, look what we have built together. When you are older, you will help us plant and harvest. We will teach you about the land and how to respect it and live from it." Lily felt tears prick her eyes. Watching Nathan with their son, seeing the love and devotion in every word and gesture, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the life they had built together. That night, after Will was asleep in the cradle Nathan had built beside their bed, Lily and Nathan sat together on the porch, watching the stars come out over the mountains. Are you happy?" Nathan asked, his arm around her shoulders. "More than I ever thought possible," Lily said honestly. "Sometimes I think about that day on the road, how tired and scared and uncertain I was. I had no idea what I was walking toward. And now look at us. A home, a garden, a beautiful son. You." "We were lucky," Nathan said. "Right place, right time. You with your potatoes, me riding by at exactly the right moment." "Maybe it was not luck," Lily said softly. "Maybe it was meant to be." Nathan pulled her closer. "I like to think so. I like to think that somehow, across all the miles and years, we were always heading toward each other. And when we finally met, we recognized each other. Like coming home." "Like coming home," Lily echoed. "That is exactly what it felt like, what it still feels like." They sat in comfortable silence, the night air cool and sweet, the sound of the stream a gentle murmur in the background. Inside, their son slept peacefully. Around them, the garden grew, full of promise and life. The first year of Will's life passed quickly. He grew from a tiny infant into a sturdy baby, then into a toddler who wanted to explore everything. Nathan built a fence around the porch so Will could play safely outside while they worked, and Lily learned to carry her son on her hip while she cooked and cleaned and tended the garden. In the spring of 1878, they planted the garden together as a family, Will sitting in the dirt between the rows trying to eat more seeds than he planted. The garden had expanded, Nathan clearing more land and building additional fencing. They now grew enough not just to feed themselves through the winter, but to trade in town for other supplies. "We should get chickens," Lily said one day as they worked, "for eggs and meat, and maybe a pig for next year." "We are becoming a proper farm," Nathan said with a laugh. "Who would have thought?" "It is a good life," Lily said simply. "Hard, but good." Nathan reached over and squeezed her hand, dirt and all. "The best life." That summer, Lily discovered she was pregnant again. Nathan was overjoyed, though also more worried this time, remembering how difficult Will's birth had been. "You are not allowed to scare me like that again," he told her seriously. "My heart cannot take it." "I will do my best," Lily said with a smile, "but babies come in their own time and their own way." This pregnancy was easier than the first. Lily felt stronger, more confident in her body and what it could do. And she had Nathan, constantly attentive and supportive, making sure she rested and ate and did not overwork herself. Their daughter was born in March of 1879 during a late snowstorm. Mrs. Cooper was snowed in at a neighboring homestead and could not make it to the cabin in time. Nathan delivered the baby himself, his hands shaking but steady, following the instructions Lily managed to gasp out between contractions. When their daughter slipped into the world and Nathan caught her, he started laughing and crying at the same time. He cleaned her off with shaking hands and placed her on Lily's chest, then collapsed beside the bed, his face buried in the blankets. "You did it," Lily said, stroking his hair with one hand while cradling their daughter with the other. "You were amazing." "I've never been so terrified in my entire life," Nathan said, his voice muffled. "Promise me we can have Mrs. Cooper here for any future babies." "I promise," Lily said with a tired laugh. They named their daughter Rose after the wild roses that grew near the stream. She had Lily's fair coloring and Nathan's dark eyes, and from the beginning she was a calm, peaceful baby who rarely cried. Will, now almost 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister. He wanted to hold her constantly, to touch her soft hair and tiny hands. Nathan and Lily watched their children together, marveling at the family they had created. "2 children," Nathan said one evening, holding Rose while Will snuggled against his other side. "A son and a daughter. I feel like the richest man in the world." "We are rich," Lily agreed. "Not in money, but in everything that matters." The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. The garden continued to expand, becoming famous in Fort Bridger for the quality and variety of its produce. Lily began trading vegetables for other goods, and Nathan joked that she was a better businesswoman than he had ever been as a trapper. They added to the cabin, building another room for the children, then later a separate bedroom for themselves. Nathan built a chicken coop and they got hens, just as Lily had wanted. They acquired a pig, then 2, then a whole pen of them. The homestead grew and flourished, a testament to their hard work and dedication. But more than the physical growth, the family grew in love and closeness. Will grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working alongside his father, learning to track and hunt and care for the animals. Rose was her mother's shadow, spending hours in the garden, her small hands carefully tending the plants. In 1882, their 3rd child was born, another son they named Thomas. He was a wild, joyful child from the start, always laughing and getting into mischief. Nathan said he took after Lily's stubborn streak, which made Lily laugh. "I seem to recall you being pretty stubborn yourself," she said. "True," Nathan admitted. "Poor Tom did not stand a chance with us as parents." Life was not always easy. There were hard winters when supplies ran low and they had to ration carefully. There were crop failures and sick animals and injuries. But through it all, Nathan and Lily faced each challenge together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Lily with a trip to Fort Bridger, leaving the children with a neighbor for 2 days. They stayed at Margaret's boarding house, which felt both familiar and strange after so many years in the mountains. "It is strange being back here," Lily said as they walked through the town. "I feel like a different person than the woman who arrived here carrying those potatoes." "You are a different person," Nathan said. "We both are. We have grown together, changed together." That evening, they sat on the porch of the boarding house, in the same spot where Nathan had courted her all those years ago. "If you could go back and tell that young woman on the road with the potatoes what her life would become, would you?" Nathan asked. Lily thought about it. "No," she said finally. because I would not want to spoil the surprise. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, they were all part of the journey. I would not trade a single one. Nathan pulled her close. I love you, Lily Brennan, more today than the day I married you, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is quite a promise, Lily said, her eyes shining. It is one I intend to keep for the rest of my life. They returned to the cabin and their children, settling back into the comfortable routine of their life. But Lily found herself thinking often about that conversation, about how far they had come and how much they had built together. In the fall of 1884, a young woman arrived at their cabin, exhausted and desperate. She had been traveling with a wagon train that had broken up due to illness and infighting, and she had been wandering alone for 2 days. Nathan and Lily took her in without hesitation, feeding her and giving her a place to rest. As Lily helped the young woman wash up and gave her clean clothes, she saw herself in the girl's frightened eyes. She remembered what it felt like to be alone and scared, uncertain of the future. You are safe here, Lily said gently. Stay as long as you need to recover your strength. Then we will help you figure out your next step. The young woman started crying. Everyone has been so cruel, she said. You are the first people who have shown me any kindness. The frontier can be hard, Lily said, but there are good people here too. You just have to find them. The woman stayed for a week, helping with chores and playing with the children. On the day she left, with supplies Nathan had packed for her and directions to Fort Bridger, where Margaret had agreed to give her a job, she hugged Lily tightly. Thank you, she whispered. You saved my life. Someone helped me once, Lily said. I'm just passing it forward. After the woman left, Nathan pulled Lily into his arms. You're an amazing woman, Lily Brennan, generous and kind and so damn strong. I learned from the best, Lily said, kissing him. A mountain man who once carried a stranger's potatoes home and planted her a garden. The years continued to pass. Will grew into a young man, tall and broad-shouldered like his father, with his mother's gentle heart. He began courting a girl from town, the daughter of the blacksmith, and Nathan and Lily watched with knowing smiles, remembering their own courtship. Rose became a beautiful young woman with a gift for growing things that surpassed even her mother's. The garden flourished under her care, and she began experimenting with new varieties of plants, always pushing to see what would grow at their elevation. Thomas remained wild and joyful, but also developed a talent for working with animals. He could gentle even the most difficult horse, and had a way with the livestock that was almost magical. In 1890, Will married his blacksmith's daughter in a ceremony at Fort Bridger. Lily and Nathan watched their son pledge his life to another person, and both had tears in their eyes, remembering their own wedding day 15 years earlier. We are getting old, Nathan said that night, lying in bed beside Lily. Speak for yourself, Lily said with a laugh. I'm in my prime. Nathan pulled her close. You are as beautiful today as you were the day I first saw you on that road. More beautiful, actually. You have laugh lines around your eyes now, and your hands show all the work you have done. You are real and solid and perfect. You're getting sentimental in your old age, Lily teased, but she was touched by his words. I have always been sentimental about you. I just hide it better most of the time. They lay together in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of the cabin and the night outside. After so many years, they could communicate without words, understanding each other's thoughts and feelings through touch and presence alone. Do you have any regrets? Lily asked softly. Not a single one, Nathan said immediately. You? No, my only regret would be if I had not stopped on that road. If I had been too proud to let you help me. I might have made it to the boarding house eventually, but I never would have had this life, this incredible, beautiful life with you. Those potatoes have a lot to answer for, Nathan said with a chuckle. The best potatoes ever grown, Lily agreed. We should make a sign for the garden, started with potatoes, grown with love. That is terrible and sappy, and I love it, Nathan said. The next spring, he actually made the sign, carving the words into a piece of wood and mounting it at the entrance to the garden. Rose decorated it with painted flowers, and it became a beloved landmark on their property. In 1895, Will and his wife welcomed their first child, making Nathan and Lily grandparents. Holding her grandson for the first time, Lily was overwhelmed with emotion. The tiny baby represented the continuation of everything she and Nathan had built together, proof that their love had created something lasting and meaningful. "We did good," Nathan said, standing beside her and looking down at his grandson. "We did," Lily agreed. "We really did." More grandchildren followed over the years. Rose eventually married a surveyor who came through the area and settled nearby. Thomas married a woman from town and surprised everyone by becoming a school teacher, using his way with animals to teach the children about nature and the land. Through it all, Lily and Nathan remained the center of their growing family. Their cabin became the gathering place for holidays and celebrations, filled with laughter and love and the sound of children playing. The garden, now tended by 3 generations, continued to flourish. It had grown to cover nearly an acre, with neat rows of vegetables, a berry patch, fruit trees that Nathan had grafted and nurtured for years, and beds of herbs that Lily used for cooking and medicine. "Do you remember when this was just bare ground and a few potatoes?" Lily asked Nathan one summer afternoon as they sat on the porch, watching their grandchildren play in the garden. "I remember," Nathan said. "I remember thinking that if I could build you this garden, if I could give you something beautiful and useful, maybe you would consider spending your life with me." "You could have just asked," Lily said with a smile. "Where's the romance in that?" Nathan grinned at her, his beard now mostly gray, his face lined with wrinkles from years of squinting into the sun. "I needed a grand gesture." "It worked," Lily said, taking his hand. Her own hair was silver now, and her joints ached in the morning, but she had never felt more content. Best grand gesture in the history of courtship. As the sun began to set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, their children and grandchildren gathered for supper. The long table Nathan had built years ago was crowded with people and food, most of it grown in the garden that had started with a sack of potatoes and a mountain man's determination to win a woman's heart. Before they ate, Will stood up and raised his glass. "To my parents," he said, "who taught us what love looks like, who showed us that a good life is built with hard work, dedication, and a whole lot of stubbornness." Everyone laughed and raised their glasses in agreement. Nathan stood up, his large frame still imposing despite his age. "To your mother," he said, looking directly at Lily, who was carrying more than potatoes that day on the road. She was carrying hope and courage and determination. I just helped her carry the load for a while. Everything good in my life came from that moment when I decided to stop and offer help to a stubborn woman who probably did not need it, but accepted it anyway. Lily felt tears stream down her face. After all these years, he could still make her cry with his words. "To love," she said, standing and raising her own glass. "To family. To potatoes." "To potatoes," everyone echoed, laughing. As the evening wore on and the stars came out, Lily and Nathan found themselves alone on the porch again, the sounds of their family cleaning up and putting children to bed drifting out from the cabin. "We built something good," Nathan said softly. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "We built it together," Lily corrected. "Every bit of it." Nathan stood up and held out his hand. "Dance with me." "There is no music." "We will make our own." Lily took his hand and let him pull her into his arms. They swayed together on the porch, moving to a rhythm only they could hear, the same rhythm they had been moving to for more than 20 years. The rhythm of shared work and mutual respect, of challenges faced together and joys celebrated as one. "Ah, I love you," Nathan whispered against her hair. "From the first moment to this moment, and every moment in between, and every moment yet to come." "I love you too," Lily said. "My mountain man, my partner, my home." They stood there holding each other as the night deepened around them, the garden sleeping in the darkness, waiting for the sun to rise and another day to begin. A day they would face together as they always had, as they always would. The life they had built had started with something as simple as a sack of potatoes and a man kind enough to help a stranger. But it had grown into something magnificent, a love that spanned decades, a family that would continue for generations, a garden that fed not just bodies, but souls. Years later, when their grandchildren were grown and had children of their own, the story of how Lily and Nathan met became family legend. The children loved hearing about the stubborn young woman with her sack of potatoes and the quiet mountain man who carried them home and planted her a garden. They loved hearing about the first winter snowed in together, about Will's birth and Rose's calm nature and Thomas's wild spirit. But most of all, they loved seeing their grandparents together, still holding hands after all these years, still looking at each other with the same love that had brought them together on a dusty road in Wyoming so long ago. Lily and Nathan lived to see their great-grandchildren, to pass on their stories and their wisdom. The cabin was eventually passed down to Will, but the garden remained a place where the whole family gathered, a living testament to what could grow from the smallest beginning. When Nathan finally passed away at the age of 83, Lily held his hand and whispered, "Thank you for carrying my potatoes home. Thank you for planting me a garden. Thank you for giving me a life beyond my wildest dreams." Nathan smiled, his eyes still bright despite his failing body. "Thank you for being too stubborn to admit you needed help. Thank you for taking a chance on a rough mountain man. Thank you for loving me." "Always," Lily said, "forever and always." He closed his eyes then, peacefully, his hand still gripping hers. And though her heart broke with grief, Lily also felt gratitude for every single day they had shared, every moment of joy and struggle and ordinary beauty. She lived another 5 years, spending her days in the garden and with her family, telling stories and sharing the wisdom of a life well lived. She taught her great-granddaughters to plant and tend and harvest, just as she had learned from her own mother so long ago. She taught them that good things take time to grow, that patience and hard work are their own rewards, that love is the best fertilizer for any garden. When Lily finally joined Nathan, the family gathered at the cabin to mourn and celebrate. They stood in the garden, now fully mature and magnificent, and remembered the two people who had created it from nothing but love and determination and a sack of potatoes. Rose, now an old woman herself, knelt down and planted a new potato in the rich soil. "For them," she said, tears streaming down her face, "so something of them is always growing here." And every year after that, on the anniversary of the day Nathan and Lily met, the family would gather and plant new potatoes in the garden. The tradition continued through the generations, long after everyone who had known Nathan and Lily personally was gone. But the story remained, passed down from parent to child, grandparent to grandchild. The story of a mountain man who found a woman carrying a sack of potatoes on a dusty road in Wyoming, who carried them home for her, and who planted her a garden big enough to hold all the love and hope and dreams they would build together over a lifetime. It was a simple story, really. A love story. But simple things planted in good soil and tended with care can grow into something magnificent. Something that feeds not just the body, but the soul. Something that lasts for generations. And in the end, that is what love is meant to do. To grow and flourish and bear fruit that nourishes long after the original seeds were planted. Nathan and Lily understood that, lived it every day of their lives together, and left behind a legacy that would never fade. Their garden still grows in the mountains of Wyoming, tended by descendants who never knew them, but who understand the power of a simple act of kindness, of hard work shared, of love freely given and gratefully received. And every spring, when the first green shoots push up through the soil, they remember the stubborn young woman with her sack of potatoes and the quiet mountain man who saw her struggling and decided to help. That was the beginning. But the love they built, the family they created, the garden they planted together that has no ending, it continues still, growing and flourishing and bearing fruit, a testament to the power of two people who met by chance, fell in love by choice, and built a life together that would echo through the generations. That is the way true love works. It starts with something small, a sack of potatoes, a kind gesture, a moment of connection on a dusty road. But given time and care and constant tending, it grows into something that can nourish a family, a community, a legacy that spans generations. Nathan and Lily Brennan knew this truth in their bones. They lived it every day. And the garden they planted together stands as proof that the smallest seeds planted with love can grow into something that will last forever.